Hi, I'm Malika Bilad filling in for Femi, and you're in the stream. Today, a utopia where everyone gets paid. Switzerland may scrap its anti-poverty programs and replace them with an unconditional basic income. Guest digital producer Dan Ning is back in the hot seat, scouring through your online comments. What are you seeing so far?
So people are telling us why they think a basic income might even be necessary in the first place. We have Nikul, look at my computer, in India. He's tweeting in, poor people have aspirations of their own, but they are deprived of any kind of opportunity due to widening inequality. So we want to hear from you, of course. Do you think your government should provide you with a basic income? Tweet us with the hashtag AJStream.
Can't wait to hear those answers. Now, there are so many ways you can share your stories with us, and one of those is Google+. Just add the stream to your circle, and you too could be in the stream.
I'm Ali Velshi, host of Real Money with Ali Velshi on Al Jazeera America, and I'm in the stream.
So what is basic income? Well, it's the idea that everyone is entitled to a minimum income, whether they work or not, rich or poor. Everyone gets a check, and that's on top of any salary you may earn. In Switzerland, this may actually happen. The Swiss are set to vote on a referendum in May that would start paying every adult citizen more than $2,500 a month. Kids under 18 would get roughly $1,400 a month. Now, you might be thinking, free money sounds great, I'm moving to Switzerland, but before you pack your bags, look at the cost of living difference between Zurich and New York. I pulled up a few graphics on my screen here. In New York, a pair of jeans, this is Levi's, $56. In Zurich, it's $151. McDonald's combo meal, fries and a Big Mac and a Coke. In New York, it's $7. In Zurich, it's $14.75. And this one is really astonishing. A chicken breast, a kilo. In New York, it's $8.25. In Zurich, it is $34.67. These facts are via numbeo.com. So the premise behind basic income is to even that playing field while getting rid of traditional welfare. Advocates say it makes those dollars more valuable both to the recipient and to the economy because it gives the consumer choice on how to spend it. But is it sound policy? Here to help us answer these questions, we have, via Skype from Basel, is Enno Schmidt, co-founder of the Basic Income Switzerland. In Lyon, France, Stanislas Jourdan, coordinator with Unconditional Basic Income Europe. In Brussels, Francine Mestrum, founder of Global Social Justice. And in Toronto, Ash Navabi, a blogger with the Mises Institute Canada. Well, let's jump right in. Enno, I want to start with you. You're an average citizen in Switzerland, and this idea sounds pretty far-fetched to the rest of us who aren't there. So help take us through it. How would this change your daily life?
So that's a question by everybody, him or herself. And first, I guess it's important to understand this simple idea. And the simple idea is that there is an unconditional basic income. Everybody needs money to live. Everybody has a basic income. And the point is to change this in the unconditional. So that's not money on the top. You can think it like that, but then think further on what will happen. What will happen is that the salary and wages are new in a negotiation, and maybe they fall. The idea is simply to say we can and we have to set the people free by livelihood. It's not a question of free market to be sure to live. And so we take this out of the negotiation of markets and do it to a democratic right. It's like right to live, and this in the way that it is from birth to death for everybody unconditionally an income. And so this, I guess, it will change the society and the life of the people to be more able to be active in the real demand and to look what's going on today and how you want to be with your skills and how you want
what would be the government incentive, though, to do that? What would this free people up to do?
So you can ask yourself. For a lot of people, nothing will change. A lot of people are in their jobs comfortable and they want to do it. But a lot of people wants to create more and wants to act in another way, for example, or take more care to their children, to other people. And what we have this productivity by machines and by goods and all this stuff, but we have less and less humanity.
All right.
thinking about other people's.
More productivity, less humanity. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here. I have a question for Ash in Canada. Ash, we asked people if people were provided with a basic income, would there be incentive to work? And we have a response here on Twitter. Lieber says, great question, but I think it will promote laziness. Why work then? And then she got some pushback though. B9 says, humans biologically want activity, else they'll find activity that suits them. Thus, basic income increases in efficiency. Ash, I want your thoughts on that. What do you think?
So labor is actually a means to an end. And for most people, that end is leisure. And leisure is actually doing whatever you want. What the basic income does is that it subsidizes leisure. And that creates a disutility for labor. Labor that's doing work at wages for someone else. So that's taking people out of the workforce, right? So because if you can make a certain income without doing any labor, then you're just not going to do that work. And in that case, that's going to reduce the labor pool. That's going to also reduce the tax base, right? Because if people are working less, they have less income, so less taxable income. So the governments have a smaller tax base to collect the revenue to fund the basic income itself.
Well, Ash, you're saying that this could take people out of the labor force, but as
Yes.
you heard in the very intro, and I pulled up another picture here, that the cost of living is so high here. A loaf of bread in Zurich is $3.35. Even with this basic income, what would that really do? Francine, I want to go to you because I know that you were agreeing with one of the tweets that this takes away the will and the want to work.
No, I do not believe that all people want to work. We may have to redefine work. That is possible. But all people want to make a useful living. All people want to give meaning to their lives. So I do not think it is a disincentive for work. But my main problem with basic income, and something that I really do not understand, is that if you want to eradicate poverty, then why do you give money to the rich? This is something that I really do not understand. I am all in favor of a basic income for poor people who cannot make a living on the labor market. But I'm absolutely against giving money to rich people or non-poor people. And that is something I really cannot understand, how this reasoning of giving money to people who do not need it.
That's a good question, Francine. Actually, let's bring Stanislas into this conversation. Stanislas, what do you have to say to that?
Well, there's a famous saying in the basic income history is that it's better to give money for the rich as well as the poor, because then the rich cannot deny that we're also giving money to the poor. Because right now, when you have benefits and anti-poverty schemes that are targeted to the poor, it's too easy for the system, for the mainstream, for the politician to say, okay, look, we are spending too much on the poor. We are giving them too much money and they are not making any efforts. And with the basic income, the idea is that no one can say you don't deserve this basic income because they will also get it. Everyone is equal, so it's a fair system to me. There's no way people can deny that other people have this right. It's like the voting right, you know. Everyone has the right to vote, and it's nothing. No one is saying anything against that. Another point I want to bring is that.
Sorry to interrupt you, but of course, part of your point, you're saying that everyone would get it, rich and poor. Then people are going to wonder, where is all this money coming from? And actually, I have an answer to that. There's this video on my screen here. This is on YouTube, and it's from Revenue de Base. Have a look at this.
How do we finance it? Easy. We have several proposals: financial and high-income taxation, a consumption tax on luxury goods and polluting products, and mainly self-financing by simplification of a very long list of current social transfers and associated public services, which have become obsolete.
would become obsolete, those social services. So we wanted to know who's footing the bill. Just really spell this out. So I pulled this up. The total cost of this scheme would be $237 billion. $10 billion would come from taxing families with kids. $34 billion would come from taxing the poor. But there's $23 billion to be made up. Where is that going to come from?
So I think it's nice to have these numbers. But the system is, again, I say, it's not possible to make very clear numbers in the moment. The principle is an unconditional basic income high enough to live will lead to new negotiations. Like you said, the most of the social security benefits can fall down, and salaries and wages, in a free way by negotiation, will fall. And that means prices can go down. The costs of work are not so high. And that means on the prices can be value-added tax or consumption tax or tax for unconditional basic income, what brings this money to this unconditional basic income. And in Switzerland, for example, we say it could be a number of we have 200 billion of the whole, and maybe 10 billion, maybe such a number is more money. So, but this is the last point of the discussion. The first point is, do we want that? And if we want that, we can finance it. It's not a question of the money. And the first point is, if I can say that, it's a question, what is the meaning of work? What is with this old struggling rich and poor, all these old stories? Let's go to a new part of the discussion, not this class struggling, not this against the rich, against this.
Francine, go ahead.
No, I cannot agree with that, because precisely what we have seen in the past decades is growing inequalities, and we have to do something about it. Yes, and that is also my problem with basic income. I'm sorry, because it is not only, but also a matter of money indeed. If you want to give money, that amount, to all the people, you necessarily have to dismantle your whole social protection system. And that is a system that has been built over the past century with lots of social struggles. And I, for myself and for others, not prepared to abandon this.
Stanislas, you're shaking your head. Why?
Because I think it's a wrong idea to imagine that basic income will replace all the welfare system. It's actually what we say with the basic income Europe is that we say it should complement and improve the current welfare, but it should not destroy it. And actually, when you look at the figures, like in France, we could perfectly have a basic income at 500 or 600 euros and still keep the pensions, still keep the unemployment benefits, and of course keep our healthcare services. Okay. This is totally plausible. It's just a matter of, do we want to, as Enno said. And it's funny because this question of financing, everyone is asking all the time, how do you finance it? But actually, there is not a single economist I know who have made a demonstration that it's not possible to finance a basic income.
Neither do we first.
We have hundreds of models. We have hundreds of models that show different proposals, different ways of financing basic income. So I really think it's really a myth that we don't have the money, that we need to tax more people to get it. It's not true.
Well, Stanislas, you say it's a myth. I will say that Francine does not look convinced. So I want to get the view from a neutral party. Dan Ming, what's our community saying?
Well, we have a community member, Maria, who left a video comment. I want to play it, and then I'm going to pose it to you, Enno. So take a listen.
I don't disagree that there's a problem in the disparity between the rich and the poor. But I think that giving everybody a base income won't help with that problem. Rich and poor are not absolute terms, they're relative. So just giving everyone a base income will not change that at all. The rich will still be rich, the poor will still be poor, relatively speaking, in the environment in which they live.
So Enno, what do you think of that? Do you think that a basic income would actually start to close the gap between the rich and the poor?
Yes, I think that...
Francine doesn't think so, but Enno, let's get your thoughts.
First, so I think that because it changes the mentality. Today, it's to be a winner to be rich, to have no idea but many money and more and more. And this is the problem in today, to have no ideas and to no activities, but more and more money. Profit is the goal of an enterprise. That is wrong. An unconditional basic income makes you free to think about what economy is, what work is, and it's not to be the strong people with many money. People who want that, that's fine, they can do that. But the main point is to abolish this brutal need and poorness by the people. And then it's really not the matter how many other people have. So this is the point for me, to abolish this, this wrong discussion, this wrong fighting against, and to create a new atmosphere, a new quality of acting and thinking and living together.
I agree with that. I agree with that objective, but I think basic income is not the right instrument to do that.
Well, what is the right instrument to do that?
The right instrument to do that is to have a decent, very general, universal social protection system that works on redistributing incomes and that can indeed close the gap between rich and poor, because that is also the problem
so
with basic
Francine,
income.
and that solution that you put forward, are the trade unions for that? Is that something that they could fill that gap, that they could be the ones advocating for that?
Of course they should. They should. They should work at modernizing social protection in a better way than it is done today. And they should indeed take care of the poor by giving a basic minimum income to the poor, but not to other people. We have calculations for Belgium. A basic income system would cost 24% of our GDP. That is exactly what our social protection system is costing today. So you either have one or you have the other. And again, I am not prepared to give up social rights, economic rights that workers have been fighting for decades. And I think we should respect that past and should try to preserve our social protection systems. Because one more sentence, if I'm allowed. There's another problem with basic income. If you have, let's say, a wage of 2,000 euros, and tomorrow you will get a basic income of 1,000 euros, you will not have 3,000 euros in total, because your employer will not pay 2,000 euros anymore, but only 1,000 euros.
Well, actually, that raises an interesting point. I want to bring Ash in here. Does that, do employers feel the need then, or will they feel the need to not have to pay their employees as much money because they know that they'll be getting this money?
Well, it wouldn't be so much the employers wouldn't be willing to pay that much money, but the employees will be actually working less, because if they're already working 40 hours a week, most people aren't happy working 9 to 5, dealing with traffic every week.
Well, it's good news because we have
and if they're making,
millions
if they're
of
working 40 hours a week to make 2,000,
people are leaving their jobs.
If they're
I'm saying if people leave their jobs, there are many jobless people who will take them. It's no worry about that.
No, but those jobless people don't have the same experience as the people who are working there. They're going to have different productivity. And not to mention that all these estimates based on the costs of the basic income are based on people working the same amounts of hours as they're working now.
All right.
But people are going to work less. If someone's making 2,000 euros or dollars a week, and then all of a sudden they're getting an extra 1,000.
Okay. Ash, would you work less?
Yeah.
We're saying people, but let's say
would you work less? Yeah, why not?
Good for you.
But who wouldn't, right? if you have to work 40 hours a week to make a certain income.
Is that a millennial thought? Do you think the older generations will think the same thing? Or would that work ethic kick in?
Right? It depends on how much you're making for your income.
And what would you do with your extra hours?
People at the lower end are going to work less because they're working more hours.
Ash, what would you do with your extra hours?
I'd read. Look at all these books.
No, Ash, I don't believe that. Ash, I don't believe that. It's a point. It's an important point. You talk about other people, and maybe you are right. But first, look to yourself, or everybody in this circle, or everybody from the audience. Ask yourself, what will you do? And then you realize, you, for example, I'm absolutely sure. You do your work because you are engaged, you love it, you like it, you have a question in this, you have your skills in this, you have the people around you you like, you want to be part of it. And this, for example, is for the most of the people the value of work, to do something good for others.
I will agree, Dan and I love our jobs.
It's a great job. I actually want to, we have our community members responding. Just 1 second, Ash. So Yanis writes in on Twitter that a basic income would encourage long-term projects, risk-taking, and discourage people from taking substandard jobs. Pretty optimistic about it. But then we have a video comment, and I want to pose this to you, Stanislas. Take a listen. Here's Chinasa from Nigeria.
It's a good initiative, and I really must commend the government of Switzerland. It can be applicable to Nigeria too. Just it takes political will. It's really going to go a long way in reducing poverty in the land and bridging the gap between the rich and the poor.
So Stanislas, what do you think about this? How do you get the political will for support for a basic income? I know you're working on this in the EU right now. How do you generate the political will?
Well, for example, like the Swiss last year, we made a petition, an initiative that got more than 300,000 signatures. So that was a way to levy people and to levy the numbers and to show that we are not just a few numbers. Many people know now about basic income. But this question is interesting because earlier in the show, it was said, okay, would you like your government to give you the basic income? But it's not like that. It's not the state. We don't ask the state or the government to give us money. We, the people, we ask ourselves that we want to give each other a basic income because we all think that we all be better with each other. We can live better with each other if we all have this safety, this financial security. So it's really a matter of building a citizen movement, a huge citizen movement. That's for sure. It's a long way to go to build such a movement, but we are doing it, and we are not ready to stop.
Well, Enno, your honest answer, because after hearing the arguments for and against, what do you think is going to happen? Will this measure actually pass?
Let's say me one word. It's important for me to say that it is bounded and combined by democracy. It's not that it has to come from the government, it has to grow up by the population. And in Switzerland we have these instruments for a people initiative, democratic instruments, and the people is a commissioner of the government. 100,000 signatures means it is legally bounded, it's not an opinion toll, and this way is important that it comes from the discussion in the population, and it is a process. To realize it's a process, it's not a case what we want to arrive, but a process by building consciousness. And
okay, so it's a process, but do you think it's going to pass? Once that process is done, will it pass?
No, the process will not.
Was that a no?
No, look to the world. We start this in here, and that gave an impulse. And now we are discussing it.
Can you give us a time frame?
A time frame?
A suggested time frame.
You mean by this voting, by the referendum? Mm-hmm. Yes. It's from now on 2 or 3 years. The government is looking on it. The ministries are working on it. They are talking with us. And then they will say, it's not good to have an unconditional basic income, vote no. And we will write, it's great, vote yes. And this comes to a referendum, and that is in 2 or 3 years.
2 or 3 years, it's kind of a long time, but we will check back in just to see what's happened and the conversations in the meantime. What's the community saying?
One last tweet from the community. Nick in London says, the problem in many developed countries is insufficient demand for labor. Basic income can guarantee a basic standard of living. So we're seeing a lot of support for this idea.
And we could talk about standards of living in our post show. But unfortunately, that's all the TV time we have for now. So thanks to our guests. Now on the next show, it's been more than 30 years since Myanmar's conducted a census. But could a clearer picture of the country's ethnic makeup worsen already tense relations there? Stay with us. The post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. We'll see you finish this fascinating conversation online. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the Stream's online post show. Let's get back to the conversation about basic income and whether or not it's sound economic policy. Now, before we ended the main show on TV, we had a tweet talking about standards of living.
Yeah, so Nick asked about standards of living, and now I want to segue back to what Malika brought up at the very beginning of the show. The cost of a chicken breast is $34 in Switzerland. Isn't this about the cost of living? Here we have a tweet from Francois. He says, should a solution to such problems be about basic income or actual reduction of the cost of living? Francine, I want your thoughts on that. Do you think that it's better to address the cost of living?
These things go together necessarily, I think. But again, my point is, I am not against giving a minimum income to poor people so that they can have a decent standard of living. But in order to do that, you do not have to give money to the rich, because there is a financial problem. You do not have enough money to pay all a decent income. And the risk with basic income is that you give half of what is necessary for a decent income, and people will necessarily have to add mini jobs at in very bad labor conditions.
But of course, you would still have the trade unions, and can't they negotiate and bargain for those things, for working conditions? Francine?
Sorry?
You would, of course, still have trade and labor unions, so can't they then bargain for those better working conditions?
Yeah, they have to, but if you only need a mini job, like what exists today in Germany, there is very little leverage that you have to really fight for better working conditions, because these are temporary jobs. These are jobs that are not linked to organizations, to trade unions, etc. And that makes it so very difficult.
Enno, you're motioning. What are you thinking?
Yes. Yeah, because with an unconditional basic income, then you are strong enough to negotiate yourself and to look to good job conditions, and you are free to say yes or no. And this system, you know, it's not to abolish all this social system by an unconditional basic income, but a lot of it's not longer necessary. And this brings the power to the people to do on the same level with the employees, with the other people, to negotiate better conditions, more responsibility, more free places, and so on. And this is new. It's not an old system. It's not this, we are one community. We are not rich and poor. We are one community, and we want to make it better.
On that question of one community, Enno, I'd like to ask Stan a question. We have a tweet here from Peter. He says, basic income will benefit entrepreneurs, but only legal citizens. We live in a global village. Where do migrant workers fit in? Enno, you're advocating for this in the EU. What about non-EU citizens living in the EU? Oh, no, sorry, Stanislas. I'm asking you, Stanislas.
We can get your answer after Stanislas.
First of all, I want to address the question of immigration. People say, okay, if France is basic income, everyone's going to immigrate in France. But first of all, it's not true that people do this welfare tourism thing. It's really not true, because actually when people leave their own country, they first leave their family, they leave their relatives. They are living why? Not just because they might get rich in France. They are living because they must live, because they are in a condition where the political system is corrupt, is dangerous for themselves.
So Stanislas, what will they be getting basic income in your vision?
Well, in our vision, obviously we have to know the people. They have to have a social security number somewhere. So they must, at some point, they must fill in some forms, and maybe they must be a legal resident. That's, in pragmatic terms, that's the only way you can do it. Obviously, if you have people who just come in your country, you don't even have their name somewhere, you cannot give them a basic income.
Enno, you wanted to say something?
Yes, a lot of points. But can I ask Ash a question?
Please do.
Yes. Ash, you said the people will become more lazy, for example.
I didn't say more lazy, it will be more disincentive to work.
Disincentives, but look, incentives is an incentive and not compulsion. And the level of livelihood and to be in fear by your existence is not an incentive, that is compulsion. And you experience by employees? Isn't it people with fear, people who are forced to do things? They are not the most productive people. And the employees, if you are an employer, an entrepreneur, you need people who are motivated, who are really work with you. Isn't that a point?
That is a point, but I'd like to make a distinction between forced by circumstance and forced by the actual physical force, as in by threat of violence. So I don't think someone being poor is forced to work the same way as, say, a slave is forced to work. No. In that sense, when someone is, what this creates most, the people who face the most disincentive to work are those at the bottom rungs of society who are making the least in wages and income. So where relatively the basic income is going to be a very large increase of standard of living to them. It's going to represent a very large increase of standard of living. So therefore, they're going to work, or they're going to.
Well, Ash, unfortunately, I mean, as we mentioned, it's not going to raise them that much, at least in Switzerland. But I want to take this briefly to Canada. You're in Toronto. There are groups advocating for this in your country. You disagree with that. But what is your solution then?
So I believe in a voluntary society. So I think the first best scenario is having voluntary charity, and we've had successful voluntary charities throughout history, starting with churches and non-denominational, non-religious groups. We still have those.
Well, whether they're churches or non-religious groups, of course, they also have their own incentives. They have their own agendas.
Yes,
correct.
They have the incentive to get people off of their support, right? Because they have limited budgets to work with. With a government income scheme, there's virtually an unlimited budget. So as big as the tax base, as big as whatever you can take from the people through taxation.
I think there's a point that you both miss, Francine and Ash, is that, okay, first you give the basic income at the beginning of the month, everyone gets the check, right? But at the end of the month, someone who is very rich, he reimburses his basic income. So it's neutral for the state. It's neutral from the financial point of view.
Of course, that's only if they're putting their money back into the economy. I want to pause that right there because I want to get our community, and they have lots to say on this, Dan.
Yes, we have a question here for Enno. So Nicole tweets in, basic income can help, but it all depends on the economic situation of the country, which the poor countries can't afford. So Enno, Switzerland is very wealthy. Is this the kind of solution that only works in a wealthy country?
Thank you very much for this question. It comes often. Yeah, Swiss is very rich, but Swiss is, that's a more important point, is a democratic country. And we have this instruments, I say it again, to bring ideas from the population, from the people in law. So there are examples, there are experiments in, for example, in Ochivero. It's a village in Africa with an unconditional basic income. This people, a very low basic income. The result is the people become more entrepreneurial. They break the rules of the former owners there. The pupils are going to school, less criminality, less more healthy, and so on. The examples that it can be everywhere is on the table, and it's not to be very rich country. The money for the people is in there, and mostly it's corruption and other things what makes countries poor. No country is so poor. And the main point for me is it has to come out of the culture of a country. So we can do it in Switzerland, or in Germany they can do it, and we do it in Europe, for example. It has to grow up from the culture of a country, and that is different. But it's not the question of being so economically successful in the way like, for example, Europe.
Well, you know, as you're talking, Francine is shaking her head. Francine?
Yes, indeed, because I think it is not very correct to compare a rich country like Switzerland or Germany or Belgium with an African village where everyone is poor. That is just not correct.
You can talk about India and Brazil then.
You cannot
Brazil has the
compare
basic income in
this.
this
You cannot compare
constitution
this.
since
And there is
2004.
nowhere have people received enough money for really a decent living. Nowhere. It's small amounts of money, just like the Bolsa Familia in Brazil, and it helps people. It absolutely helps people. But that is not a basic income. And I would like to add one more.
Sure, your last word, though, because we are running out of time. Go ahead, Francine.
Yeah, one more argument. This unconditionality is absolutely impossible. I mean, we live in a society, we are citizens. The state has responsibilities towards us, and we have responsibilities towards the state. You can never have unconditional systems. There's always a matter of reciprocity in all systems.
Well, Enno doesn't look like he's convinced, but unfortunately we'll have to take that conversation online. That's all the time we have for now. Thanks to all of our guests, Enno Schmidt, Stanislas Jourdan, Francine Mestrum, and Ash Navabi. Now on the next show, a look at the upcoming census in Myanmar. The country hasn't collected nationwide census data in 30 years. How will it affect relations between ethnic groups? We'll find out. In the meantime, we'll see you online.